Whether you're a beginner or an experienced videographer, filming at night can just be a struggle. So in this video, I'm going to give you my best tips for filming high quality footage at nighttime and in low light conditions. My name is Peter Sarellas, and if you're new here, I make sports videography tips and tutorial videos on this channel. And the first tip that we have with regards to filming with low light actually involves your camera, and that is to use a camera with a full frame sensor. Obviously, full frame sensor cameras are more expensive and budgets may not allow for this, but if you can justify it, using a camera with a full frame sensor will get you much better results in low light than a crop sensor. I'm filming on the Sony a7 IV right now, and it is nighttime. I do have lights around me, but it is still fairly dark, and the full frame sensor of the Sony a7 IV allows more light to get into the image, reducing the amount of noise and increasing the dynamic range of my shot. In general, a full frame sensor is going to be better because it allows more light into your image than a crop sensor when filming in low light conditions. And so if you're going to be filming where the light isn't that good, you may want to consider using a full frame camera if you're able to. Part of my janky audio setup, I'm literally holding a shotgun mic right now because I had nowhere to boom it. But the next tip for filming better videos at night is to use fast lenses. So getting a zoom lens with an f2.8 aperture or faster even, or a prime lens with an f1.8 aperture can do wonders for filming at night because it opens the iris of your lens wider to let more light pass through and hit the sensor, exposing your image. Right now I'm filming at ISO 800, but because I have the Sony 20mm f1.8 on my camera and I'm filming at f1.8, I'm able to sufficiently light my image even though I only have a dim light bulb in front of me right now and have lights on behind me that should in theory be silhouetting me and making it so you can't see any detail in my face. The lens is doing all of the heavy lifting here and making this shot happen, and it can make shots happen for you when you're filming at night. Now, your camera choice can be hugely helpful in allowing you to shoot high quality videos at night. I'm outside right now with absolutely no key light and only the ambient light around me lighting this shot. But because I'm filming on the Sony FX3, which has a dual base ISO of 800 and 12,800, this shot looks very clean. And what this dual base ISO means is essentially there's two ISO values on this camera where you can get the least amount of noise and the most dynamic range in your shot. Some cameras are specifically designed to have a base ISO value that's very high. The FX3 and the a7S III from Sony, for example, have a base ISO at 12,800, meaning that when you shoot specifically at ISO 12,800, not above and not below, you will get the least amount of noise and the most dynamic range, giving you a clean image and allowing you to expose nighttime shots with no key light like this one. Now, all the tips we've talked about so far have revolved around camera gear, and camera gear can be a huge part of filming in low light, but you may not necessarily be able to justify spending a ton of money on fast lenses and full frame cameras. So if you're trying to film good videos in low light without all of that stuff, one thing that you can do is reduce your frame rate. Filming in 120 frames per second, for example, which is something that many people like doing when filming sports, requires you to have a faster shutter speed. If you film in, say, 60 frames per second, then you can reduce your shutter speed from 1/250 to 1/125, and this is going to allow more light to hit your sensor because of the slower shutter speed. If you are really struggling and it's incredibly dark, then you could film at 24 frames per second with a 1/48 shutter speed, and this would give you a ton of light into your image, and that's actually what I'm doing right now to expose this shot. Whereas if I were to film it in 120 frames per second, not that I would ever do that for this particular scenario, but just as an example, it would look like this. Much darker and definitely not as flattering of an image. Now, I really like over cranking my shutter speed when I film sports videos, and this means using a faster shutter speed than usual to get less motion blur in your image. I think it makes fast-paced sports like football or basketball or something like that look really intense. But when you're filming in low light, similar to the point I was just making about frame rates, you don't want to use a very fast shutter speed because it makes your image darker and makes filming in low light harder. So oftentimes I won't overcrank my sports videos when filming specifically at nighttime to get that slower shutter speed. Now, when you have footage that's shot in low light, like the shot that I'm filming right now, you want to make sure that when you're color grading, you let your shadows be shadows. Don't try to lift your shadows up to brighten your image, because it's going to introduce a lot of unnecessary noise and make your image not look very good and honestly pretty artificial. But if you just let the dark parts of your image be dark and increase the light in your image by lifting up the highlights and the whites as needed, then you're going to get a much more pleasing look. And you can even crush the blacks and lower the shadows to make them even darker, crushing any potential noise in your shadows. I am not the brightest part in this image right now, and when I go back to edit it, I'm definitely not going to lift the shadows. I'm going to let this shot live as intended, with all these lights on from stores behind me being the brighter part of the image, and myself with absolutely no light in front of me being the darker part of the image. And in spite of the subject not being the brightest part of the image, it should still be a pleasing shot and one that's going to work in this video. Now, if you followed all the steps we've talked about so far and you find that you still can't expose your footage at nighttime, then something that you can try is filming in a flat picture profile. Log picture profiles are great because they give you more dynamic range, but they also require more light and have to be overexposed to work properly. If you underexpose a log picture profile, it's going to be really noisy and just give you an overall unpleasant look. You can expose much lower when you're filming a shot with no picture profile or a standard, more saturated picture profile. Right now, I'm filming with no picture profile enabled on my Sony FX3, and instead of filming at ISO 12800 like I have been doing for the other talking head shots in this video, this shot is filmed at ISO 3200. The compromise here is that I don't have as much room to alter the colors in post-production, and I don't have as much dynamic range, but I'm able to get a good looking shot with a lower ISO. So if you have a camera that can't necessarily do some of the things we've spoken about previously, using a more saturated picture profile could be a good solution for you to get by when filming at night.
New day, new fit, but same Peter, because I forgot to record the last part of this video. But the final thing that you can do to improve the quality of your videos when filming at night is use noise reduction software. And yes, this isn't technically a filming tip, this is an editing tip, but using a noise reduction software of any type can be so helpful because it allows you to shoot at a higher ISO level, properly exposing your footage, and then even though you're introducing more noise into your footage as a result of that higher ISO, you can remove it with a really good denoiser and then get clean footage that is properly exposed using the full dynamic range of your camera. I like using the denoising software in DaVinci Resolve Studio, which is the paid version of DaVinci Resolve, but there's plenty of options you can use for denoisers, and I recommend you do a bit of research and find which one works the best for you. If you like this video, please subscribe to the channel because I post videography and video editing tips and tutorial videos similar to this on a regular basis. I would love to have you around for that. If you have any questions about any of the techniques that we talked about today, or you have some techniques that you can share from your own experiences filming at night, let me know in the comment section. I would love to have a chat with you down there. And that's going to be all for today. So until next time, peace.